Hey guys, in architecture, engineering, construction, supply chains, AECS, the difference between grit and stubbornness can be very hard to distinguish when you're building a venture, when you're building a company, both for you as a founder and for your shareholders. And so today I'm going to talk about how you can objectively diagnose whether you should be gritty or whether you are unnecessarily stubborn. Tune in. Hey guys, welcome to this week's AECVC. Building a business in architecture, engineering, construction, and supply chains, AECS, is difficult as it is. And even more so, it is difficult to understand when you should be gritty and when you should stop being stubborn, because both things can actually look the same. This is what grit looks like. You're carving away, you're chiseling away at a stone, and over the years of your AECS startup, you're carving a beautiful image. This is what stubbornness looks like. This is when you try to jam your head into a wall because you don't know what's on the other side of the wall. And sometimes also people need a little bit convincing. So this grit versus stubbornness can also be expressed as consistency versus a lack of adaptability or adaptability. And both of these things stem from the same underlying trait, and that is you as a founder having a long-term vision. And from your commitment to your long-term vision, derive grit and consistency, but they can also derive stubbornness and a lack of adaptability. And it's difficult, it's challenging to distinguish the two. Not only for investors, it can be challenging for yourself. Now, the difference between the two, where in your journey you currently sit and on which side of the fence you currently land, comes down to whether your vision is still likely to succeed or not, or whether it's likely to fail or not. That's another way to express the exactly the same problem. Now, in AECS, by my experience, it's not easy in general, but in AECS, by my experience, it's even more difficult because we have so many nitty-gritty details and nuances that will inform whether your vision will actually succeed or fail and the probabilities, etc. For investors, though, this can become even more difficult to diagnose and help you self-diagnose because founders have 1,000 times more information than the shareholders. And the only truth, I keep saying that to founders I work with, the only truth lies with your customers. It does not lie with the investors. They have 1,000 times less information than you. And so that's why grit and stubbornness can look the same from the outside. They are very similar close cousins to a generic investor who lack the details, who lack the nuances, who lack knowing what question to ask to you as a founder and help you self-diagnose whether you are still making sufficient learning and headway within this industry. And that makes it then extra hard for the founders to self-diagnose if you don't have someone in your boat who can help you a little bit, because the founders have 1,000 times more information than the investors. Now, in times of adversity, of which every startup does have several, and in AECS perhaps one or two extra, this information asymmetry between the founder and his shareholders or her shareholders can lead to tension in times of adversity when a diagnosis is required whether we are still being gritty for the right reasons or whether we are being stubborn for the wrong reasons. And so it's this information asymmetry that especially can happen with founders who don't know with investors who don't know the industry, what questions to ask and help you self-diagnose. And so that means that when the information only lies with the customers and the only truth lies with the customers, what founders and investors in AECS need to team up to is to commit to a process of learning from this customer truth and from repeated failures with the customer. It's this learning process. And if both your shareholders and you yourself are committed to this learning process, you will over time figure out whether your long-held belief and your long-term vision is still likely to succeed or not. Whereas if you both are not equally committed to it, that's when the tension comes into play and whether the key distinction between grit and stubbornness is tougher to diagnose between the two of you. So make sure that you still have a joint process between your investors and yourself to learn from customer truth. If you don't have that, that's when tension happens. The thing though is, so that's a difficult thing to get in any kind of startup. But in AECS, I have learned that the diagnosis is even harder. Oftentimes, there is another wall that you can smash your head into, and that is because the AECS industry has so many niches, so many small customer groups, so many details in so many corners, that whenever you feel like, hey, I didn't succeed in this place, let me try that place, there's always that extra justification to do another kind of learning, to try a new kind of angle, or to try a new kind of even more narrow niche. That makes it harder for you as a founder in AECS to self-discern and self-diagnose whether you should be genuinely persevering or you're simply stuck in a loop. And for generic investors who haven't really gained much experience with your market, it's even more distant, it's even harder. And that's what AECS is about, is all these different angles that makes it harder for you to diagnose whether you should be gritty or whether you're being unnecessarily stubborn. So my recommendations for these founders and maybe your shareholders to diagnose or self-diagnose grit or stubbornness in your AECS venture is twofold. One, check whether you're still consistently learning from your customers, learnings that are repeatable. If they are not repeatable, if they are not substantial, this could be a strong indicator after you have dedicated some time to your company that you perhaps are more stubborn than you actually learn repeatable and substantial learnings going forward. Because if you're not, it's more likely after some time that you're in a dead end or a niche market that you won't be able to repeat. This is a relatively objective way to self-diagnose. As long as you keep learning repeatable learnings, it's not essentially likely that you're stuck. And the other is when you bring shareholders on board, be it angels, be it VCs, families, it doesn't matter. Whenever you bring shareholders aboard, they will have 1,000 times less information than you. So make sure you pick shareholders and investors who understand this information asymmetry, who understand that AECS has all these quirks and angles, and who commit with you to a process of continuous learning, but who will also help you self-diagnose with honesty and straightforwardness. Hey, I think you might be stuck. We're not gaining additional repeatable learnings here, and who will not be afraid to tell you that. But at the same time, who will also not assume that they have found the wisdom of truth, and they will actually not give you extra input because the only truth lies with your customer. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Make sure that you subscribe under aecvc.com, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. See you next time.